Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on efficiently licensing high-quality foster parents. My name is Crystal Coble, and I am at the UNC School of Social Work with the Jordan Institute for Families. And we have several presenters here that I will allow them to introduce themselves in a few moments. We are going to go ahead and get started. And once again, if you haven't already downloaded the handouts for this webinar, you can do so on the screen, or on the left hand there's a file share pod that will allow you to download the handouts from there. So we will go ahead and get started, and thank you for joining us today. So a little bit about this webinar. It was developed through funding from the North Carolina Division of Social Services by the Family and Children's Resource Program, which is part of the Jordan Institute for Families here at the UNC Chapel Hill School of Social Work. So why this webinar? If we think about it being especially relevant when we think about the number of children in DSS custody and the trends that we have seen over the last few years. So the number of children and youth in care has been trending upwards since December of 2012. So the total number of children in DSS custody in North Carolina at the end of March of this year was 10,806 children. So keeping those numbers in mind, the number of children in care, we want to take a look at the infrastructure of our foster care system that works to place these kids. So in North Carolina, we have 100 public child placing agencies, 81 private child placing agencies, 97 residential child care facilities. And then for foster homes, as of April of 2017, we had 6,843 licensed foster homes, with about 38% of them were family foster homes supervised by DSS public agencies, and 58% were either family or therapeutic foster homes supervised by private agencies, leaving 4% were residential child care facilities. So in order to provide foster homes for the rising number of youth in custody, North Carolina needs an ample selection of high-quality foster families for children to live. So in order to recruit, train, and license these families, there are things that each of us can do to work together to improve this process of licensing quality foster families. So whether it begins with the things that the North Carolina Division of Social Services has been doing and continues to work to improve, or things that supervising agencies are doing, or things that individual child welfare professionals can do. So it's these practices and continuous efforts at improving how we go about fulfilling the need for quality foster families that this webinar is really all about. And it's what we're here to talk about today. So by the end of this webinar, we are hoping that you will be able to explain what the North Carolina Division of Social Services is doing to enhance the licensing process and to support supervising agencies. And you'll also be able to describe effective strategies supervising agencies are using to speed up licensing of families while maintaining an emphasis on quality mutual assessment. So we actually have some presenters here with us that are going to share some strategies that have worked for them and may work for your agency. And then finally, identifying one or more areas in which your agency's practices might be improved. And in this section, we really want to hear from you all in thinking through implementing some of these ideas or additional ones that you may have. So many of you have already found the chat box and said good morning, so good morning in return. You'll see that there are two options in this box that let you either send a message to everyone or just to the host, meaning those of us here at UNC. This will be the primary way that you can communicate with us, and you can use this box to send in questions or comments as we're spending our time together this morning. and we're going to try our best to answer all of your questions during the event. Sometimes this box moves rather quickly with so many participants on the webinar, but we have someone behind the scenes who's helping us keep track of your questions. So since this is just one 90-minute webinar and we have a little over 300 people participating, we know we might not be able to get to every single question, but we're going to do our best. There will be a follow-up document after the webinar that answers questions asked during the webinar, and it will be emailed out to all registered participants and posted with the webinar recording. So if it's not a question that we get to today, it will be included on this follow-up document, as well as any questions that we do answer we'll include here. And the webinar recording will be posted on ncswlearn.org, as well as on the Family and Children's Resource Program webpage. So there are additional icons that you can use to get our attention. You can, if you click on the, in the middle of the screen towards the top, the little man with his arm raised, you can click on him to get our attention and raise your hand, or there are quite a few different options there to communicate with us. So if you all could, just so I can make sure you've located this, if you are participating in a group, if you could raise your hand this morning. And this will actually help us know how much time to give people during some of the questions and activities that we'll be doing a bit later. All right. Looks like so far we have quite a few people that are joining us together in a group. And just to give you a snapshot of who is joining us today, we had 303 people registered for this webinar, and that includes 193 DSS registrants from 77 different counties. We also have 99 people registered from private agencies that are representing 43 different agencies. And we also have 11 registrants from the North Carolina Division of Social Services. So thank you all for being here. And next, I would like our presenters to introduce themselves. Once again, as I said, I am Crystal Coble here with the Jordan Institute for Families. And we have technical help from our colleagues John McMahon and Southie Blanton and Philip Armfield here today. And I'll let our guests introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Reines. I'm with the Division of Social Services, and I'm the Foster Home Licensing Manager in the Black Mountain office.
Good morning. I'm Alice Moore, and I am the Foster Home Licensing Supervisor at New Hanover County, Department of Social Services. And I've been with New Hanover for almost 17 years. And I have worked in child protective services, child custody. I've been a licensing worker, and now I supervise that unit, and I'm excited to be here today.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Rockoff, and I am the Foster Care Licensing Supervisor with Methodist Home for Children. And I have been with Methodist Home for Children for over 6 years now, and I have about 13 years total experience in child welfare services, and I'm very happy to be here today.
So thank you to all of our presenters for being here and assisting with this learning opportunity for our child welfare system. We'll also make sure we give you presenters' contact information at the end of the webinar. So a little about what we're going to cover today on our agenda. We'll have information on the update from the North Carolina Division of Social Services efforts and what they're doing to enhance this licensing process, as well as their recommendations. And then we'll have a section on things supervising agencies can do, and we've divided this up into different sections. So we're going to cover initial contact and orientation, and then we'll move on to pre-service, and then linking pre-service and licensing and support after licensure. So we'll cover each of those areas. And then we'll finish up with some practice implications and a question section for you guys to ask some questions as we're here today. So I'm going to start with sending it over to Michelle, who's going to give us an update on the North Carolina DSS efforts for licensing high-quality foster parents.
Thank you, Crystal. So as you know, this webinar is part of an overall effort to decrease the time it takes to license new foster homes. While the focus of this webinar is on what occurs before the application is submitted, I wanted to explain some of the changes at the Black Mountain office that impact timeliness of processing new applications. In the past, the Black Mountain office has had some issues with this, and so the division recognized the need to support the office with staffing and some other functions. So just to give you a little history, last year from January to the beginning of October 2016, the average time to process new applications once they were received in the Black Mountain office was 34 days. Now, a lot of this had to do with staffing levels at that time. Prior to October 2016, the Black Mountain office only had 2 full-time permanent and 2 part-time temporary foster home licensing consultants, plus 2 full-time processing assistants. Now, as I mentioned, the division recognized the need to add more staff, and we began that process. So, in October, we added 2 more full-time permanent licensing consultants to the Black Mountain office. Also, shortly after that, in late 2016, we engaged in a lean business improvement process for foster home licensing actions once they are received in Black Mountain. And let me just clarify, I'm sure you all know this, but actions are not just new applications. It also includes relicenses, changes, terminations, etc. So this lean process was conducted to improve all of those procedures, not just new licenses. And as a result of lean, several changes were made which improved our efficiency. In February 2017, they hired a manager that would be based in Black Mountain, and of course that's me. There had not been a manager full-time based in that office for at least a couple of years, and not really exactly in that position for a long time. So the division also had recognized the need for there to be an on-site manager there. So what I'm happy to say is that from March 2017 to the present, as of this week, we're actually adding a few more folks this week, we now have 6 full-time permanent consultants. We have 4 full-time processing assistants. However, one of them also works with the field consultants. So she helps us, but she's not fully on our side of the team. We still have 2 temporary consultants at the moment. One of them is transitioning to some other duties, but we will keep another temporary part-time consultant for at least the next several months. So we have definitely doubled our staff within the last several months. And as a result of these efforts, the staffing as well as the lean process, the average time to process new licensing applications from October 2016 to February 2017 has decreased to 13 days. So that's a 62% reduction of what it was before. Now this is an organization chart for the regulatory and licensing team, and as you can see, I mean, I know it's a little bit difficult to see. It is available in the share pod, but Linda Waite is the program administrator over the entire team, and the team kind of has 2 parts. The folks on the left are the field consultants, and they work with licensing private agencies. And there on the right are the staff that are based in the Black Mountain office, and we're the ones that process all foster home licensing actions.
All right, thank you, Michelle, for that update on the efforts that the North Carolina Division of Social Services is doing. And also, Just as a reminder, the handouts, the organizational chart that you might not have been able to see on the screen, it's page 2 in your handouts. So if you want to take a closer look at that, we do have that there for you to see. So now we're going to move to touch on the topic of initial contact and orientation. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle, and she's going to start with division recommendations in this area.
Yes, and what I'm going to do is just give some general recommendations from the division. Jonathan and Alice that are going to speak after me are going to give you a lot more detailed information. But essentially, we as the division recommend 3 things. 1, that you respond to initial inquiries immediately, as soon as possible, preferably within 24 hours. Also, that you provide orientation, preferably in a group setting, to minimize staff time and provide consistent information and answer all questions for the participants. And this is really an important aspect too, is to complete a pre-approval process. So go ahead and start collecting information and conduct a home visit to identify significant obstacles before proceeding with the formal licensing process. In other words, before a family starts their pre-service training, etc., it's a really good idea to check out their home and their circumstances to really be sure if they should even go forward with that process. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan with Methodist Home for Children. I just want to give you a quick overview of our program. We are a private nonprofit agency. We are headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we currently have about 112 homes, primarily in and around Raleigh and in eastern North Carolina in the Greenville area. We provide traditional foster care, therapeutic foster care, foster to adopt, and private adoption services. Our team consists of 4 licensing specialists who also train MAP, and I serve as both a supervisor and a licensing specialist myself. And in terms of the way that we train MAP 4 times a year, twice in Raleigh, twice in Greenville. We typically start with about 10 to 20 homes each class, knowing that we will definitely lose some, so we tend to over-invite. And we've actually added a little bit to the MAP curriculum, so we are very careful that we do not interfere with the fidelity of MAP. We have just added some extra nights for topics that we feel are important to teach our parents, such as training on sexual abuse, substance abuse, and nonviolent crisis intervention, just to name a few. So the initial contact and orientation phase, how does that work at Methodist Home? Well, the first way we usually receive most of our inquiries is people will email us or they will call us on a general line, and we have staff rotating. We have our 4 staff rotating that, and they will each take different days answering the calls, answering the emails, and it's always the same person that's following up. So if it's your day to answer the inquiry line, then you will continue to follow up with that same person throughout that process. We track that data. It's very helpful for decision making and recruitment. We look at where the calls are coming from. We look at any trends to see if there's any areas that we need to recruit in more. When the people call and we get them through the email or the phone line, we always make sure that we screen them to make sure that they meet minimal qualifications to be a foster parent. If they do, we then invite them to one of our monthly information sessions, and we hold those in both Raleigh and Greenville, and those are always posted on our website. They could always call and ask us directly when they are, but that information is always available to them as well. At the information sessions, the families will fill out a shorter version of the application to give us some more information about them, and if they're still interested, they turn that in at the end. We then go over that information with our team, including our intake specialist, and she tells us about any trends that could be popping up. So if we specifically need homes that, for example, could take sibling groups in the Durham area, those are the homes that we would then try to recruit. After the information session, we always follow up with those homes a maximum of 2 weeks after to let them know if we're going to invite them to the next class or if we're going to decline. And even if there is a wait, they always know when the next class will start. So that's something that we began doing probably a couple years ago. It's been very effective. So even if there is 4 months to the next class, we always know what the start date is going to be. So they always have a date they can put down on their calendar when they know the class will begin. And then, of course, we follow up regularly with those potential homes until the start date of class. So if the class isn't for a few months, a lot of people, they can either decide to back out, we can lose contact with them, but we try to keep reminding them regularly that the class will be starting. We ask them to let us know if they do need to back out of the class, so that spot can be filled by a different potential family. And I'm now going to pass over to Alice, who's going to talk to you about what New Hanover County.
So in New Hanover County, we are a public agency, and we have right around 120 foster homes. Some of our homes just want to be foster families, some want to adopt, some aren't sure what they want to do, so they may foster or foster to adopt. We have 4 licensing social workers, and they each teach the TIPS map. They license families. They complete pre-placement assessments. They recruit foster families on an ongoing basis. They manage adoption assistance, and they find placements for children coming into custody, or if children need to be moved or need respite. And we are very fortunate that all of our licensing staff have child welfare experience, and they just do an excellent job at what they do. We have 4 former foster/adoptive parent co-trainers that teach the TIPS map with us. So each licensing worker is paired up with a former or current foster or adoptive parent to train together. And we find that that helps the class members get a lot of good first-hand information about becoming a foster parent. Our unit averages around 23 placements a month, and that again includes initial custody, if children have to move from one placement to another, or if a family needs respite. In 2016, we licensed 46 new foster families, which was a big increase for us. We usually license about 30 to 34 new families per year, and in 2016, we had 25 families close out. We do track every family that leaves our program. We track why they left, and we also track people becoming involved. We think that information is really important and helpful for our program. And another big piece is that our staff are working monthly to recruit foster families. They give presentations, they go to community events. We do a lot of close work with our county media office, because in order to have a good pool of foster families to choose from, the community needs to know that there's a need for foster families, and we want to get that message out. How it works in New Hanover is actually very similar to Methodist. We have people that come into our agency, they email us, they call us, after maybe seeing an article in the paper or searching on the internet. And again, we track all of that data, and they are immediately assigned to a licensing social worker, and the licensing worker will get back to them usually within 24 hours, sometimes much quicker than that, and they explain our program. We give the family an application, answer their questions over the phone, and then set up a home visit. We call it a pre-assessment home visit. And during this pre-assessment home visit, it's really a good time for the family to share what they're looking for, and for us to share with the family about our program to see if the two match. After that home visit, we usually staff the family. We discuss if there's any potential barriers to licensure, like a swimming pool or a criminal history, and we run criminal background checks. We find that this home visit is just very important and can be a great way to start that pre-screening process. We also give families the 15-minute online orientation for foster parents link that was put out by the state, because that gives them a good idea of what the program is about. If the family is interested in moving forward and we don't foresee any major red flags, we invite them to our next TIPS MAP class. And similar to Methodist, we always have the next class scheduled because we find maybe if a family can't come in the springtime, they can come in the summer. So even if there's a full class or a wait list, they know when the next class is going to be. And again, we track all of the people that contact us to become a foster parent. We track how they heard about us. We have a lot of word of mouth inquiry referrals and a lot of foster families who refer other foster families to our program. And we track when foster homes close out and why.
All right, thank you all for that information on initial contact and orientation. We found that it's helpful not only to have information from the division, but also to have our partners from counties and agencies share some of what they're doing. So next we're going to hear about pre-service training and things that we can do in this area for helping licensed high-quality foster parents.
So the first thing I want to say is we keep referring to pre-service as training, but it's not really a training. It's not intended to be to provide information on everything a foster parent will ever need to know, but rather it is a decision-making mutual assessment process. Now, the division requires that you use a pre-service curriculum that we have approved, and these include TIPS MAP, which in the little box there on the slide, you'll see what TIPS MAP stands for. It's Trauma-Informed Partnering for Permanence and Safety, Model Approach to Partnerships in Parenting. Now, the other curricula that are acceptable are Deciding Together, Presley Ridge, and Pride. The division requires that you deliver pre-service with content fidelity. So that's a combination of lecture topics plus activities, the use of the strengths and needs assessments, and not making any deletions to what is in that content. Now, for example, if you're using TIPS MAP, it is designed to be delivered as one 3-hour meeting per week for a total of 10 meetings in over 10 weeks. Now, different schedules are allowable, but the division recommends following the 10-week schedule. Also, pre-service should preferably be co-facilitated by an experienced foster adoptive parent and agency staff members.
So to tell you a little bit about how Methodist Home for Children works our pre-service training, again, we offer MAP 4 times a year, twice in Raleigh, twice in Greenville. We also have what we call MAP prep days, and these are days before class when the licensing team comes together. We make all of our copies, we get all of our paperwork together, get all the folders together. So on night 1, we are ready to go, and all the paperwork's all set. All we need to do is pass it out to the families. We also have our trainers, or our licensing specialists, are also the same people writing the mutual home assessments. We feel that this is very effective too because we're spending all that time in class with them, really getting to know them. And when we go in their home to write their home assessments, we've developed a good relationship and rapport with them. Recently, we also started distributing a checklist on the very first night. And on this checklist is all the paperwork that the parents can begin working on as they're going through class. And we found that to be great. By the end of class, a lot of our parents have actually already turned in a lot of their paperwork, like copies of their driver's license or their rabies certificates for their pets. So that's been a very valuable tool. Within 2 weeks of the first night of class, that's when their licensing specialists will make the first home visit. That's when we're assessing the living space, pets, etc. And we're always having what we call real conversations with family, meaning that we always want to paint a realistic picture of foster care to the potential homes. So they can make a very good decision. Part of that mutual assessment process, they're getting all the information that they need to make an informed decision by the end of class. Our agency also has foster care specialists. They're the people who are working directly with the children. They will start coming to class throughout the process too to start building those relationships with the homes. So as soon as their license comes back and it's approved, they already know the families, they already know the types of children that would do well in their home. We also have panel nights. We show movies. We have different case studies. All that just helps, again, paint that real picture of what foster care is like. And then at the end of class, we have parents complete a 4-point evaluation, which is included in the handouts. We're always seeking honest feedback from our parents. Like I said, it's a 4-point scale, and at the end we go through all the data, we accumulate it, and it just helps let us know, hey, what can we do better for the next class? Because we really do value what the parents say and the feedback that they provide for us.
At New Hanover, we do a lot of things also very, very similarly to Methodist. We offer the class, again, 4 times a year, once per quarter. And we also have MAP preparation days, and the social workers get together with their foster parent co-trainers and work together to get all the preparation done. We do hold class 2 nights a week for 3-hour sessions, and generally those classes are on Tuesday and Thursday nights. We also pass out the forms during the class so that the members can begin working on those forms, and things that may take longer like fingerprints or getting a physical schedule, they can go ahead and start doing that. Whoever's teaching the class is going to be having regular conversations with the other 3 licensing staff, because the person teaching the class will not be writing all of the applications for all of the class members. We divvy up the class members with the licensing staff so that it's about equal, but they do all sit near each other in the office and have daily communication about families in class. We also hold a panel at the end of our class, and we always try to include a former foster youth, guardian ad litem, the agency attorney, our foster parent association president, and child protective service and or adoption social worker. That really helps the class get to meet other people involved with the agency and to hear from them. And also similar to Methodist, we also use an end-of-class trainer evaluation form that looks very similar to the one that Methodist uses. And that's really helpful for us to see where our strengths lie and if there's anything we can change during the class experience for families.
So we're actually going to next do a short activity, and I'm going to switch to a different screen. It may take a moment to load, so just be patient. It should show up. And really what we want to look at so far is the 2 areas that we've talked about. So far we have talked about initial contact and orientation, and we have also talked about pre-service. So if you could choose one of these 2 questions to answer, so either what else could your agency do in the area of initial contact or orientation to help with licensing high-quality foster parents, or the same question in regards to pre-service, and then type in the corresponding chat box below them, and then we'll look over some of the answers. I know that it's sometimes helpful to hear from other agencies or counties some of their suggestions or things that they've come up that they would like to start doing. So I'm going to stop talking for a few moments so that you can get your answers in, and then we'll look over them. So it looks like we have lots of answers here. If you could finish up typing your last few ideas, and then we'll be able to go over them. I know there are a lot of people here, so the screen continues to move. So once everyone gets their answer in and we're not continuing to type, then we'll be able to look over some of the things that you all have shared. All right, I'm going to start looking over some of these while you guys are putting in your last few ideas in these two areas. So first, I'll start with looking at initial contact and orientation. And there were quite a few things here. There were themes that kind of came up for me that you guys thought would be good ideas or enhancing the things that you're already doing. So early on, a few of the things that I saw quite a few times were different people mentioning the pre-screening process. And I think someone else said, completing the pre-screening home visits sooner than they initially had. So it may be something that you're already doing, but now recognizing that we could do it a little earlier to enhance how efficiently this process is going. Also, someone mentioned the pre-training home visits. So again, starting that process and that contact earlier to help make the process go a little smoother. Also, there are quite a few people that mentioned continued communication, and that I think is something that you will hear throughout this webinar as is a key. And it's not just between the agency and the foster parents, but making sure that in every realm that we can continue to stay in contact and stay on the same page, and making sure that everyone kind of understands and know where we are with the process and the steps that are coming. It can really help the process along. And I heard quite a few of you mention that the emphasis on communication is important, and it can also be continued and probably enhanced a little. Let's see if I can pull out a few others. The screen has slowed down from moving a little. So mentions I like to go to them after first contact, taking the application and answering any questions up front while assessing the home environment. So once again, kind of answering any of those questions early on. Someone says pre-screening early, and that goes right along with kind of starting that process earlier. And we do have one question here that we'll add in our questions that we're capturing and see if we can't get an answer to it for you. Scroll up to see if I have some that stands out. Lots more people mentioning home visits before MAP or whatever training it is that you're using. Here's one, a checklist. So if we haven't yet covered it, I think it's something that we will. The idea of using a checklist, and this can be useful for families to know, what some of the expectations are that are coming and things that they are going to have to provide, and having that information early. And Jonathan mentioned that if they know what they're going to have, it helps them get the information to you earlier, whether it's, as he mentioned, the rabies, information about the pet. So just having that information can be helpful if that's on a checklist, or it could be in many other ways that you could use that checklist. All right, so good job on the area of initial contact and orientation, and there are many other things there that you guys can read through. So now I'll look over at the things that your agency could do in the area of pre-service to help. So one that I pulled out was very similar to some of the information for initial contact. So assessing before starting MAP. So instead of waiting for them to get however far into MAP, so really starting that process earlier. of the mutual home assessment and providing information. So once again, this is for them as well to make sure that this is the right fit and the right decision for their family at this time. Someone says, keep your head up. It's always good to have that motivational kind of piece of information to keep you going through this process. Having a current foster parent come into MAPS training to discuss their experiences and answer questions. So yeah, this is a good piece of advice, whether it's something that you do regularly. Some agencies do have this as a regular occurrence at every training night. But I think also making sure that it's something that we do implement and have someone there that can answer those questions. They have real life experience that they can share with foster parents as they're coming on, and it can really go a long way hearing from the people that are living and breathing this every day. We also have someone that says including a panel in MAP training is something you could do or has been helpful. Setting the training schedule for the year, that's something that I believe both Jonathan and Alice mentioned, in that the way that they found that helpful is what it does is it gives the families information on if I can't make this training class, then these are the next ones. Maybe a certain season of the year is, their kids' football season, and so they're really busy, but I know that there's another offering coming up in January or February. So that can be really helpful, and that's a piece that I think came out in multiple different areas of this conversation about efficiently licensing families. Let's see if I can pull out a few more from here, and again, you guys can read through these as you're going. Quite a few people still, continuing to mention the foster parent as a co-trainer, whether it's TIPS MAP or other curriculums. Having a team meeting with the licensing team so we're all on the same page. And I think this definitely goes back to communication. So making sure that we're all working together. If it's not the person necessarily that is having the interactions with this family, making sure that you can come together and we're all on the same page so that we can be there to support the families through the process. So I think that definitely goes back to communication, both within your team at your agency and with the families that we're working with. And I'll ask Michelle or Jonathan or Alice, is there anything that you saw that really stood out for you that I didn't point out that you think would be important to mention? Sorry, I kind of put them on the spot here. And if you need to scroll through, then you absolutely can. And we'll be doing another activity very similar to this later on in the webinar.
This is Michelle. I do like the fact that on the initial contact orientation side, a lot of people are recognizing the importance of doing pre-screening.
Yes, that's one that's come up quite a few times, and so I think that's it's good that we've had some themes that came up that we feel like agencies feel like will be helpful for them.
I also noticed that somebody pointed out that it's good to get the birth children involved too. I like that a lot. When you're going in to do the home visits, taking a moment to speak with the birth children, seeing what they know about foster care, what they think about foster care, because as I'm sure a lot of you know, if the birth children have an issue with the placement or foster care in general, that home will not last very long. So you need to make sure that it's been properly explained to the children as well, and that they're completely on board and understand what's about to be changing in their family.
And just noticing the comments about having the set schedule throughout the year, we have had families call us maybe last year and then they call us again this year. So I think the biggest thing about becoming a foster parent is the timing in your own life with your own family and your own situation. So I think it's okay when a family may call, but they're not quite ready to take the class now, but then they may call us back 6 months later, a year later, and they move forward. So we do track all of that, and we do see those families, and we are thrilled when they call us back and say that now's the right time to start the process.
All right, thank you for pulling out those additional points. I think when we're looking through the multiple responses, I think it's good to hear from different people what really stood out for them. So we're actually going to switch back to the PowerPoint screen. It may take a few moments for the slides to show back up. And when they do, you can see that the next thing that we will be covering, so we've covered initial contact and orientation as well as pre-service. So the next area that we'll be focusing on is linking pre-service and licensing and things that we can do in this area. So we're going to start back with Michelle in this topic area.
Yes, so the first thing that we want to talk about is that mutual assessment and licensing paperwork should ideally be completed by staff who trained the pre-service. Now, when this is not possible, and we know sometimes it's not, we strongly recommend that the meeting notes be shared and frequent conversations occur between the staff. Plus, the staff should attend some of the group sessions to begin relationships with the prospective foster parents. Now, included in your handouts is the 12 skills for successful fostering and adopting. This is a very helpful resource for linking the 12 skills content from pre-service with the foster home licensing application. So we strongly recommend you take a look at that. Also, to complete the paperwork, home visits, and consultations during the process of pre-service training. Now, by this, I don't mean that the packet would be entirely finished at the end of pre-service, but certainly start the process and try to get a significant portion done during that pre-service. And this is kind of similar to some other things that we've said, but use internal controls. Have a process for reviewing all licensing actions before they are submitted to the division. This will save a great deal of time by avoiding returned applications due to errors and incomplete information.
Okay, and I saw somebody ask if there's a pre-screening tool they'd be willing to share. We have one, too, that we could definitely share. I don't think it's in the handouts, but I'm sure we could get that connected to you. We could share that with you if you are interested. So we'll talk a little bit about how Methodist Home links pre-service and licensing. Our goal as a team is to submit applications to Black Mountain 4 to 6 weeks after the last night of class. We understand that some homes will be a little bit slower, some will move a little bit faster. That's just the nature of this, but that checklist really does help, and it helps us identify which homes are moving quickly and which ones we can get submitted to Black Mountain. And since they're moving so much faster approving the licenses, it's been a much better experience of getting homes up and running shortly after they finish class. We also start working on foster parent development plans while they are going through the process, and what we mean by that is we try to identify goals for that home to work with, and we try to base them off the 12-skill curriculum. So, for example, if we have a family with birth children in their home, we could use the skill of assessing the impact that foster care is having on them and it's having on their birth children. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. We also have internal reviews before we submit any paperwork. So before anything is even submitted to Black Mountain, we review it multiple times on our team. So we kind of pass our packets around and check each other's work, and that's really cut back on returns quite a bit. We do use DocVault to submit our documentation, and again, those foster care specialists are contacting the potential homes when their licenses are being reviewed in addition to being in class. So again, as soon as we get that word that the license has been approved, that specialist can start talking to that family about connecting them with some potential placements.
In New Hanover, we feel that communication between whoever's teaching the TIPS map and the licensing worker for that family is key. They start those conversations during class and continue them onward. Usually by the second week of class, we know which licensing worker is going to be licensing which family. It may be the family that they did the pre-assessment home visit with. It usually is, but there may be one worker that only has 3 families in the class and one that has 6. So we try and divide it equally so that all families can become licensed efficiently and quickly. Our goal is to submit the packet to Black Mountain within 30 to 60 days of finishing the TIPS MAP class. There is an internal review by the supervisor and the program manager before we send it to Black Mountain. I will add that we are not perfect. We do get follow-up questions asked of us by Black Mountain, but we just try and keep a good working relationship with the consultants in the Black Mountain office and get them what they need. We do not use DocVault, but we do check the state extend report, and that report is updated daily, so we are able to see as soon as our families are licensed. We don't have to wait on the paper 5015 that comes in the mail. And there are many times where we find out on a Monday a family is licensed and we're calling them for placement Monday night or Tuesday. So having access to that extend report is wonderful. And I would encourage the public agencies, I'm not sure if the private agencies have access to that or not, but if the public agencies are not using DocVault, to ask for access to that report so you can have up-to-date daily information about licensing. We also, if we have a question about a waiver or a licensing rule, we reach out to Black Mountain. So we bug them a lot, but we find that it's better to ask the question ahead of time so we can move forward.
All right, so that was our information on linking pre-service and licensure. So the next section that we want to go over is looking at support after licensure. So we'll once again start with Michelle for recommendations in that area.
Well, the first thing that I want to talk about is actually not just something you would do after licensure. It's really before, during, and after. And that would be ensuring that all staff are well-versed in the North Carolina Administrative Code 70E and the Foster Home Licensing Manual. And this is really more than a recommendation. This is essential to doing this work. It is also important to set professional development goals as part of the licensure process, to initiate and define an ongoing development plan to ensure that all foster parents continue to grow the skills and knowledge that they need. And also complete processes for all subsequent licensing actions as early as possible, especially relicenses to avoid expiration. Now I want to talk just a second about relicenses. The rule states that relicenses are to be submitted to us 60 days before the license expiration. Sometimes we get them far in advance of that, and we are asking not to have them sent far in advance. No more than 90 days, so in the 60 to 90 days time period is perfect. And we're asking that because when relicense packets are received more than 90 days in advance, it's more likely that the documents in the packet will be outdated by the time of relicensure.
So I'm going to jump in. We have some questions that popped up that are really relevant to kind of the sections that we're covering now. So I'm going to see if we can't answer a few of these before we move specifically onto the Methodist Home for Children strategies. So the first question, and Michelle, tell me if this is something that you can answer. I believe I've heard you touch on this before. Is the question that we had on, does the state recommend that licensing specialists only train and license homes? Because in many smaller counties, the licensing specialists oftentimes wear many different hats, and it makes it difficult to do everything that is being recommended. So all the suggestions are wonderful, which I agree with. It's a manpower issue, though, in some of these small counties, only having one foster home licensing specialist. Michelle, is this something that you could speak to now?
Sure. You know, it is something I did sort of touch on earlier, and that is that, yes, in a perfect world, the licensing specialists at your agencies would do the pre-service as well as the whole licensing process. But we realize that that can't happen in certain agencies for various reasons. So it's okay if two different folks or two different groups of people do that. It's just, as I'd mentioned before, it's very important to have a lot of good communication between the trainers and the licensing staff.
Thank you, Michelle, for going ahead and answering that one. I know it's one that probably many smaller counties were thinking as we're continuing to go through. So I felt it was important to address that one. There's a few others here that we may be able to go ahead and answer. Any of my presenters, some of the questions that we've seen pop up, the more recent ones that we can go ahead and try to get an answer out to.
I saw Tracy Trask asked if we could share our checklist used during the beginning of pre-service. Absolutely, I could figure out a way to get that out, and any other documentation that you've heard about that you might want to take a look at and see if you can make it work for your agency.
And once again, we'll be sharing contact information towards the end of the webinar, so that if kind of specific requests continue to come up, then you can either reach out that way, or we are going to be sending out a follow-up document, and we'll see if these requests are things that we could possibly include with that. So we'll check in on that and see if it's something that we include. Any other questions that we feel like are best answered now? We will have a question and answer section at the end. Okay, so I'm getting some head nods that some of them aren't as relevant for right now, so we'll answer them towards the end when we get to our question and answer section. So thanks for letting me jump in, and we'll turn it back over to Jonathan for continuing on support after licensure.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have foster parent development plans updated at quarterly home visits. So after the home is approved and they are licensed, we have these development plans, and they're similar to the plans that the kids have, where we come up with 3 goals for the parents, typically 3, and they are relevant to their needs at the time. And again, I talked about relating them back to the 12 skills. So let's say if a parent is very slow with follow-up or communication, we can make a goal about them communicating effectively, and we try to give them some hard things that they can do to work on that goal. Some different goals, like I said, depend on the 12 skill and which ones their needs are at the time. We also offer 24-hour support 7 days a week to all of our homes, so they always know that they have somebody to call, and it's always going to be that same person. Whether there's a crisis, they need someone to vent to, or just someone to talk to, they'll always have someone on the other line of the phone. In terms of training after their license, we offer quarterly in-services in our offices. We always try to pick relevant topics that'll meet their needs at the time. So for example, our fall in-service is going to be about shared parenting, and then the one closer to the holidays is actually going to be about grief and loss related to the holidays. So we try to bring in outside trainers who can speak at an expert level about those topics. If parents have other needs, we seek out other options for them or other trainings in the community. Like for example, I recently had a home who has a teenager in their house who had gang activity, so we're trying to find them some gang training that can help them specifically. And then we also offer safety day training, and that's regularly scheduled throughout the year. So that's your first aid, your CPR, medication administration, nonviolent crisis intervention. So the parents always know throughout the year when they're going to be required to come in for training. The foster care licensing specialists attend the clinical staff meetings. So again, that goes back to the communication piece, just making sure that everyone on the team is on the same page. And we encourage one another to speak if there's any issues. We devote time during clinical where the foster care specialists can tell the licensing specialists if they're having any foster parent issues. In other ways we support, we have a quarterly newsletter that goes out. We're starting an advocacy board for foster parents. We have various events throughout the year. Coming up on June 3rd, we have an event that has to do with transitioning teenagers into adulthood. It's a real-world simulator. We do that every year shortly after graduation. And we just finished up our Foster Parent Appreciation Dinners, which we do every May for Foster Care Month. We have referral bonuses. So if a home is referred by another and that home actually completes the licensing process. That's the key part. Then the home that referred them will get $150 referral bonus. In terms of relicensing, and Michelle talked about this a little bit, but we send the relicense paperwork to families, and the key word there is we send the relicense paperwork to the families 5 months in advance. So that gives them 3 months to work on it and complete it. So ideally we can get it into Black Mountain in that 2-month time frame that they're requesting. We always track initial license dates and timelines, so we know exactly how long something is taking, how long it's taking us to license the homes, how long it's taken them to finish their paperwork, and then we track their initial license dates to see how long they stay with us. It used to take 2 to 3 months to finish up this process after class. We've really been able to cut it down to 1 to 2 months. Of course, some homes are still going to go slow, but we've really seen an increase in the amount of homes we can get submitted to Black Mountain much faster. We also prioritize the homes that are moving quickly. We try to reward them. So if they're turning in all their paperwork, they're getting their fingerprints done, their physicals, their fire inspections, we'll give those homes top priority and make sure that we get those out to Black Mountain the fastest. For quite a few years, we seem to be stagnant around 80 homes. Since we've implemented a lot of these changes the past couple of years, we're now up to about 112 homes and rising. We should be in the 120s by the end of the summer. And really just through support and efficiency, we found that we're also doing a much better job of retaining homes, which we feel like is just as important as recruitment.
And Jonathan, one quick question that came up was about the 24-hour support and which worker provides that. So can you share how Methodist Homes for Children does that piece?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, our division of labor is that we have the foster care specialists, and those are the people who are responsible for actually working with the families and the children. And they're going to be on call 24/7, and then on weekends they rotate. The foster care licensing specialist is also available, but we more do the licensing, the training, the relicenses, all that paperwork. So to answer your question, primarily that's going to be the foster care specialist and then the foster care specialist supervisor if they cannot be reached.
All right.
In New Hanover, we offer quite a bit of support to our families. We have a monthly foster adoptive parent association, and we provide in-service trainings during those monthly meetings based on foster parent needs. Trainings may be grief and loss, role of the guardian ad litem, managing behaviors in children, and we continually ask them for their training needs. We have a monthly newsletter that goes to all of our families, and the main newsletter is in the Share Pod today. That newsletter is created by one of my staff. She does a wonderful job with that newsletter, and the main newsletter focused on highlighting our foster families for Foster Care Month. We also provide in that newsletter upcoming trainings. We recognize foster parent birthdays. We do a tip of the month for parenting, and our links group for our teenagers, we put information in there about that. We also have a monthly adoption support group that's co-facilitated by a local therapist in Wilmington and one of my licensing staff, and that group is for foster families who want to adopt or have adopted, and that is an excellent extra support for those families that go through some challenging situations. We also, within the last year, have a group called the Fostering Faith Group, and it was started by a couple foster moms, and that group I think has grown to over 50 to 60 members, and they meet once a month as more of just a support group, and we have heard very positive things about the added support built in. New Hanover also has 24-hour support. Our agency has an after-hours social worker, so if there's an emergency that comes up after hours, the after-hours worker would respond. Also, our licensing staff do offer a great deal of support to their foster families after 5 o'clock and on the weekends. We try and pair up newly licensed foster parents with experienced foster parents. Our licensing workers attend child and family team meetings and court with foster families if needed. We also use the quarterly visit checklist. We review the 12 skills with families on an ongoing basis. And we also send our relicense packets to families 5 to 6 months in advance of when they're due. We know that there are always going to be some families that take forever to get their physicals or their fire inspection, but we do try our best to get those packets to Black Mountain 60 days in advance. We're not perfect, and again, that's where that good communication comes into play with our agency in Black Mountain. We also have May event, a foster parent dinner or picnic for Foster Care Month. In November, we celebrate Adoption Month. In December, we celebrate the holidays. We also have a program where foster kids get gifts from community members. We do a roller skating party and try and give them those ongoing supports. And the other thing I want to add is that we have a great partnership with the other local foster care and adoption agencies in southeastern North Carolina, and I think that just really helps in child placement.
All right, so now that we have covered the next two areas of our webinar, we're going to go to an activity again. The good news is that the activity is very similar to the one we just completed, but the areas we would like you to focus on are linking pre-service to licensure and support after licensure. So once again, if you could choose just one question to answer, and we'll go over some of those. And again, it's what else works for your agency in the area of linking pre-service to licensure or support after licensure. All right, if you could take one last moment and finish up your last thoughts, and then we'll look through some of these answers and ideas that you all had, and it gives you an opportunity to look over what some of the other participants had and see if there's any ideas that you feel like would be fitting for your county or agency. All right, so I'll go ahead and start pulling out some of the things that have come up. I see one thing here. We have it in all caps: following up with parents. Do not start communication and then stop it. And so I think quite a few other people mentioned communication or continuous communication throughout the process. And again, I think for each of these kind of 4 areas that we've asked questions in, something that you could do or probably improve or enhance, I think communication is probably something that could show up in any of those 4 boxes, just because I think it's an area that definitely is something that we can emphasize and always continue to work to improve. Also had somebody mentioning developing a website. I think that's a really kind of unique and different idea that could be helpful in this area. I saw that someone mentioned having the trainer completing the licensure, so that was an idea that you had heard that feel like could work for your agency in this area. Also, the quarterly newsletter that I believe it was Alice definitely mentioned, and possibly Jonathan as well, and specifically focusing or highlighting a foster family in that newsletter. And you will see that in the handouts for this webinar, an example of that newsletter is in there, and it is it's really well done, and it's really nice to look at. So for those of you that heard this idea and thought that it would be something that you would like to try to do, then there is an example in there for you to look at. Also, I see it would be great for agencies to share any training aids or questionnaires to help with the licensing application. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about this webinar and some of the other resources that we'll be able to share at the end is really being able to share with each other things that have worked, whether it's specific training aids or checklists or processes, so that you can see if it's something that that might or might not work for your agency. I know we had quite a few things come up about, with small agencies that Michelle spoke to, when you're wearing multiple different hats. And I think someone said, for me, it's really about working smarter, not harder. And so if there are any of these small tools that you can take away that might be helpful in helping you work smarter, since you are wearing those multiple hats, then I think then we can consider that a win. Also pull out improving tracking documentation from beginning to end. So I think that is a piece of information that's helpful not only in this area but several different ones that we've covered, is making sure that we, in order for us to know, if we're working to improve something for tomorrow, we need to know where we are today. And so improving that, tracking that data and information throughout the process is going to be important. So in the area of support after licensure, some of the things that I just initially saw, setting up training based on the needs of family. So I think training is something that probably many agencies and counties do, but really making it relevant to the current needs of the families that you have can be really helpful, and it makes families feel heard. This is what we're needing. This is what we're struggling with, or the barriers that we're having. And then you're able to have someone, come in and speak to that topic area, I think can go a long way. So yes, that idea of having your training based on the current needs of the families that you have. We also had quite a few people mention support groups with a therapist, or parent support groups, and that being something that you really felt like your agency could do, or maybe you are doing it and it's something that you could focus more on or enhance. I saw someone mention they have a very active foster parent association, and also a foster adoptive support group. And so this may be something that lots of you have in your agencies, and I think continuing to learn things that we can improve this will be helpful. I also see we have the clothes closet to assist with clothing for children. Looks like Wanda Wilkins, I see you put yours in all caps, so it's easier for me to pull them out when we're reviewing them. Also see that someone mentioned that they really like the quarterly trainings and banquets. Alice specifically mentioned, the kind of the topical ones with the picnic in May, and then kind of over the holidays, and many of you may do something over the holidays, but really making those a quarterly event and possibly something that families could really look forward to. Is there anything else, guys, that I wasn't able to directly pull out? I know there's lots of people on this webinar and we weren't able to get through them all, but I know that you can read through them probably quicker than I can speak to them.
I was going to answer two questions I saw come up. One of them, somebody asked what programs we use for tracking. So we actually use a system called KaleidoCare, and that allows us to track a home from the time they initially call us to the time that they start class to the time they're licensed, and then after. And you can actually set that up to get electronic notifications when a home is going to need the relicense packet as well. So we have a system that helps us with that. We also have just kind of an old-fashioned Excel sheet I also keep too with all those dates on it too that I check once a week to make sure we're not missing anything. And then somebody asked about support groups, and they said they have trouble getting their parents to commit to those support groups. So we were having some trouble with that too, and what we did is actually identified some of our stronger parents and parents that are real leaders and asked them to lead these support groups, and we've found that there seems to be a little more interest doing it that way when the parents take ownership of it themselves.
And this is Alice, and I saw a couple questions as well. One of them was how many licensing workers we have at New Hanover, and we have 4. We feel very fortunate to have 4. And then for our tracking, one of our tracking tools is when families close out their license. It's actually just a really simple Word document with the name of the family, when they closed out, and why they closed. That way at the end of the year we can say 25 families closed and 50% closed because they adopted, 25% closed because they moved away or had lifestyle or health issues. So we just use a really basic tool for that, and then we use spreadsheets for some of the other tracking, but I like the idea of what Jonathan just mentioned, so we're probably going to look into that.
Even our presenters are learning from each other. All right, so I will switch back to our PowerPoint, and the next thing we're going to do is key takeaways, and then we will have time for more questions after that. So I believe it's Alice and Jonathan are going to really pull out some of the key things that we touched on throughout the 4 different areas that we covered during the webinar.
So I think a big one for our agency is just that strong communication is key. Having the licensing workers be working together closely. They each have their own caseload of foster families, but they also know the other foster families. So just because you're working with one family doesn't mean you can't call another family for placement. So we're very fortunate to have that strong communication. Also with our foster parent co-trainers for TIPS MAP. It's great to have that ongoing communication during the classes. And having them as co-teachers for the classes, we are very thankful to have those co-trainers working with us. And then also just linking pre-service and mutual home assessment, from that first phone call when the family calls us to going out and doing the pre-assessment home visit to coming to class, and then beginning to write that mutual home assessment as part of the 50-15, or sometimes my staff write pre-placement assessments if it is a family that they're very interested in fostering to adopt. So just having that consistency with the social worker and the family along the way helps a lot. And also, if there are any issues that come up, let's go ahead and talk about those issues early. Sometimes the longer you go without addressing the issues makes it even harder to address. So if there are red flags or questions about criminal backgrounds or fingerprint clearance or anything, we try and catch those early and start talking about them in the very beginning. And again, that usually starts around the time of that pre-assessment home visit.
And when I was talking to Alice about this, it was really nice because we were actually able to compare a lot of things that we have in common. And that's kind of what this slide here is about, some of the things that we both find are very effective. And again, one of them is just having that 24-hour access to support. This is obviously a very overwhelming experience for a lot of parents when they first start this, especially, or if they have a child with a lot of behaviors or that's frequently in crisis. So them just knowing that they'll always have somebody that they can reach out to really helps them out, and it reassures them, it eases a lot of their fears. Again, it's going to remind or bring this up again. Alice and I really both believe in this, is having that MAP training and the orientation scheduled at set intervals. Again, just to drive it home, parents always need to know when the next class is going to be. And even if there's a wait, if you can tell them, hey, you're going to start on this date, and even if it's 3 months away, we found that they're more likely to show up, even if it is 3 months away, knowing that there is a start date, and it gives them time to set up childcare or readjust their schedules or whatever it may be, so they can attend that. And then just that providing timelines for when licensing components are due, having those expectations as a staff, and then also giving the parents expectations too, of letting them know the quicker that you turn in this paperwork, then the faster that we'll be able to move forward with you and get you licensed.
All right, so now we are going to work to answer some of the wonderful questions that you guys have come up with. I know a few of them were specific to things with us being able to share the pre-screening tool and the checklist. And once again, we will work to make sure that we can get that and see if it's something that we can include in the follow-up document, so that you all have examples of that. I also did see a question about a listserv that would be helpful, and I believe one resource that we do have is going to be on our related resources slide, that there is a listserv. There's several different groups, but we do have information about the Recruiters Network, a listserv for professionals from public and private child placing agencies. So that is one resource that we will have on the next slide, and we may have a little more information about that one. So questions. So I'll turn it over to our presenters to answer some of the questions. I believe Alice, was it you that wanted to start? Oh, she answered the one. So we'll go over to Michelle on some of the questions that you identified, that you can go ahead and.
Okay, so I am going to kind of pick a few different ones, and I will certainly get answers to everything eventually after the webinar. But the first one that I wanted to talk about was the third question that had to do with getting fingerprints and RILs back in a timely manner. And we are very aware that this is an issue, and we are in the process of working on that. We will be having another meeting about that in late June, so hopefully we'll have some concrete answers at that time. Now I'm just going to scroll through. And I'm not sure, there was the question here about Together Facing the Challenge. I'm not sure if you can see the participant answers on your screens. Okay. Well, in that case, that's fine. I believe that question has been answered. The question from Kim Clayton about the strengths and needs and the 12 skills, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, so if you could maybe clarify that a little bit more. Okay, answer for Maggie, we did talk about the listserv.
And also with the listserv, Jamie Bazemore shared that there's additional listservs, NC Kids listserv, as well as a separate MAP trainers listserv from the division. So she also did share that, and we'll have additional resources after we take a few more questions. And then we did have one that just came up. How do you gain access to the MAP site? Is that something that some of our presenters may know off the top of your head on accessing that site? I know it's a curriculum that you guys use. And for the questions that we aren't able to pull together right now and answer, we will have them on the follow-up document. So all the questions that were answered, as well as the ones that we won't be able to get to, we'll have all the information on the follow-up document, and it will be shared with everyone that's registered for this webinar.
For the question about gaining access to the MAP site, that was something we all got when we were trained by the state. So that might be a good question for Ginger or somebody with a state office.
And we've answered this partially. So Katrina asked what programs are used for tracking from inquiry to how long families remain with the agency. So I know Jonathan mentioned that they use KaleidоCare, as well as sometimes just a good old Excel spreadsheet. So Alice, what do you guys do for tracking data about families? Is there a specific program, or do you use the good old Excel sheet?
We use good old Excel sheets and Word documents, ongoing documents.
One day we will have an answer for how to revamp Excel sheets. You either love them or you hate them. All right, so if there's other questions that you guys see that you want to jump in on, we can. It is almost time for us to wrap up, so we may be able to answer one more question.
Well, this is a fairly simple one. There was a question about, I'm sure it was relating to relicensure, about is it 60 working days or just 60 days? And that is actually calendar days. So all references to timeframes that I have made in this webinar and things that you'll see in the rules have to do with calendar days.
All right, and it looks like we have someone that shared the TIPS map site website, and that you'll need to establish an account to access it. So thank you for sharing that, to sharing the answer for some of the questions that came up. And again, we'll continue to work together here with this team, as well as with other partners, to get answers to these for you. So those will be questions that will get out to you. And so we are going to move forward because we are close to running out of time, and we're going to take a minute to go over some related resources. So the first one that we have on here is actually a webinar that we have coming up in June about diligent recruitment of foster and adoptive families, and that webinar is actually on June 23rd, and it's another 90-minute webinar that is being facilitated by the Jordan Institute for Families, and we have partners that will be coming to speak, presenters at that one as well. Other things that would be relevant for you all on this webinar, we have the orientation for NC foster parents. This is an online orientation for families in North Carolina that are considering becoming foster parents, and it's on ncswlearn.org, and it's about 15 minutes, so you'll see that on there. Also, fosteringNC.org, a learning site for North Carolina's foster and adoptive parents and kinship caregivers. I see someone has on here, do you register for the June 23rd webinar through NCSW Learn? And my response is going to be yes, the same way you would register for this webinar, you'll do for that one as well. And John has shared that it is open to child welfare professionals from county DSS and private child placing agencies. Next, on some of the related resources, we have Foster Home Licensing, the Keys to Success, which is an online course on reducing the rate of incorrect or incomplete licensing paperwork, and that is about a 2.5-hour course. Also, Foster Home Licensing Training, a 3-day course covering the process of licensing for foster parents. Also, there's the TIPS MAP Train the Trainer, which is an 8-day curriculum. And then we mentioned some of these. Next, we have groups available for support. We have WAFCA, the Western Adoption and Foster Care Association, which meets quarterly in Black Mountain. Also the Recruiters Network, which I mentioned, which is a listserv for professionals working in public and private child placing agencies. And then also the Southeastern Adoption Consortium meets every other month to share information and promote adoptions through foster care. I know quite a bit of you ask, is it something that we can, get together and have kind of a meet and greet with professionals? And so one of these groups may be a way for you to kind of do some of that networking and sharing resources, as well as lots of other helpful information. And I think there are others out there that we haven't captured here that were mentioned for listservs, such as NC Kids. Listserv was also mentioned. So next, as promised, the contact information for our presenters. And again, thank you to each of you for being here and doing a wonderful job. We'll continue to work with them to get the answers to some of the questions that have come up. So here's the contact information for the presenters. And these slides are in the handouts, so if you weren't able to get that information and need it, then you can get it from those slides.